I've been looking forward to being able to sit down with a cup of tea and review and discuss this release for quite a number of months. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the 5 people you kill in Middlesbrough as a part of the Torchwood main range by Yvonne Hartman, a rather bold Big Finish story, and one with a very interesting title. This release does of course star Tracy Ann Oberman as Yvonne Hartman and is available to order now on the Big Finish website. The physical CD is £10.99 and the download is £8.99. There is additional story details on the Big Finish website as well as a trailer that can be listened to. The cover artist for this release is Lee Binding and it is probably one of the best Torchwood main range covers of all time. I absolutely love it. I certainly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. So taking a look at the production credits on the Big Finish website, the senior producer for this series is David Richardson, the director is Scott Handcock, the music by Blair Moat, the producer is James Goss along with the script editor, the sound designer is from Peter Doggart with music by Blair Moat. This episode has been written by Yvonne Hartman with the executive producers being Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig-Ellery. So without further ado, let's take a trip to Middlesbrough. I never quite thought I would say that within a Big Finish review. Yeah, here we are. This is an audio drama that quite honestly when it was announced I actually thought that it was a spoof parody. I thought it was somebody's very good artwork that they'd done wanting Yvonne Hartman to come back, and I was out shopping when I seen it at the time. I came back and then seen that it was on the Big Finish official Twitter and boy was I shocked. However, I'm very happy to see that this audio drama actually exists, because the first thing that I want to discuss within this review is representation, because I'm really happy to see my part of the UK, because I do of course come from a place very close to Middlesbrough. It is great to see my area actually being represented within Doctor Who media, as I feel like when it is represented, it's either represented in a rather bad way or not represented at all. Of course, in the current era of Doctor Who, the 30th Doctor era, we have a focus on Sheffield. Of course, we keep returning to this location as it is the home, I suppose, of Yaz, Ryan, and of course Graham, and we have Sheffield in the Reckonings in the UK, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and Resolution as well. However, there's nothing particularly special about it being in Sheffield. If anything, it's kind of only just being used because it is different to being, once again, another southern city which has been used time and time again. So it is really lovely to see the North actually being represented within an audio drama, and it actually has some meaning to it, because there is a kind of a reason why the North has been used in this story, which comments on certain things outside of the actual audio drama, which again is very welcome to see. I think that if you are a Doctor Who fan that is not keen on messages being used within Doctor Who, especially when it comes to political statements or general statements about the current society that we are living in, firstly, seriously, and secondly, this is most certainly not an episode for you, because this episode is packed with references to the current times that we are living in, a commentary on the times that we are living in, but also at the same time raising some rather important questions about why certain things are done in the current society that we are living in. So for example, there is a rather clear north-south divide argument within this episode, such as the likes of funding, alien spaceship crashes on the top of Middlesbrough. The reaction to that, because it is a city/town within the north compared to it being a spaceship crash in a southern city, would indeed be very different, because it's so far away from the central powers in government. It seems that less attention is taken to it up in the north because the spaceships crashed up there, and it's so very far away, therefore it's not really going to affect them. One of the things that is rather different with this story is that we have a considerably large cast list. Of course, with the vast majority of the Torchwood main range stories, we get very used to maybe only having 3 or 4 characters. This episode has a slightly larger cast list, which really brings the episode to life, and more importantly, the process of the spaceship crashing and the many different people that handle that situation are kind of responsible for the events throughout this episode. So as a result, we have a process all the way throughout, and of course Yvonne going to see these different people, and all of them kind of hindering the process in a certain way. So to start off with, we have Jill Kerr, who is the leader of the opposition, as portrayed by Casey Ainsworth. Then we have the brilliant Timothy Benedict, as portraying Alfie Scott, who is kind of the government representative for Middlesbrough. Then we have Nathaniel Curtis, who is playing Lancelin Green, who is a rather outspoken podcast host. Then we have Casper Beecham, as portrayed by Dennis Lawson, who is kind kind of another government official. And then finally we have More Sinister, as portrayed by Sarah Powell, and she's responsible for a rather overly expensive app that doesn't particularly work, which is meant to tackle the problem of the spaceship crashing and basically the atoms coming out of its engines and eventually killing lots of people. However, the app doesn't work and it's absolutely useless, so her whole job throughout this story is kind of also rendered useless. Sound a little bit familiar? I think it does rather personally affect the people who are listening to it. I think if anything, if you listen to this audio drama and not even slightly get annoyed, not because of the actual audio itself, but because of what it's commentating on, it kind of just shows how absurd the current times that we are living in are. And I must admit, even filming this review right now, I'm kind of holding back from breaching outside the confines of the narrative of this audio and actually talking about the outside world, but instead I'm going to focus entirely on the actual episode as much as I can, because it is just infuriating to see that the events throughout this story are indeed very much a reality. And I suppose in some ways Doctor Who is a show that goes around the wide expanse of the universe. It has been to many different galaxies and many different planets, and we've seen many different aliens, and yet this story is probably the most accurate ever Doctor Who story that I've listened to what would actually happen if aliens crashed on Earth. What would actually happen with the government officials involved? What would they do to interact to the situation, especially if that spaceship landed anywhere else but the south of England, or at the very least London? But that said, even though I have just said that this episode is infuriating, without a doubt there is lots of laugh out loud moments throughout this episode as well. Yvonne Hartman, as portrayed by Tracy Ann Oberman, is as wonderful as ever. I absolutely love the character, I love what she brings to Torchwood, and all of the releases that I've listened to with her within are just simply a joy. I think that Torchwood 1 is a brilliant series. Equally, One Rule within the main range is also a very fun story, of course set within Cardiff, and I think that this episode has a lot of quirky one-liners that I come to expect from the likes of James Goss and Scott Handcock Productions, because even though this episode does tackle a lot of hard-hitting themes and quite frankly has a rather worrying link to reality, there is a light-hearted element to this story which doesn't fully make it completely bleak. This episode is certainly enjoyable because of how ridiculous it is. So what is meant to happen in this world when a spaceship crashes on Middlesbrough and just so happens to wipe out the transporter bridge? Well, they're meant to apply the Icarus protocols, and the Icarus protocols have been implemented by the government to basically ensure that when a spaceship crashes anywhere within the British Empire, it means that they hand over the powers at least to Torchwood and they can take control of the situation, and probably the government can do a few things on top of that as well if the Torchwood finds them useful, that is. However, the Icarus protocols are not implemented throughout this story, and instead we have all of the power being handed over to relevant government officials, one of which of course is Alfie Scott, who decides to not implement the protocols because, spoiler alert, he can't. Then we have other people who are responsible for putting up a cordon in order to contain the effects of the leaking spaceship. It turns out that the person who is doing that is completely not qualified to even do that. And then we also have the people who are meant to be stopping the government officials from not doing their job, and that is of course the opposition. Equally, they are just as incompetent throughout this story, as they are not doing anything, they're not standing up for their own aims, and Yvonne is tracking all of these people down and trying to figure out what the hell are they doing, and more importantly, what are they doing other than the job that they are meant to be doing, and why is the entire process being slowed down. And of course, inevitably, that leads to a certain person at the very top that is responsible for absolutely everything, and kind of making the incompetence happen on every single level along the way, which ultimately leads to a load of deaths. Because on a rather serious note, what doesn't link to current times more than government incompetence leading to the masses of death in a certain country at one given time? I've said throughout this review that this release is absurd and crazy. However, I do not want you to get the wrong impression of that, because everything about this story is plausible. It is so easy to make an absurd and crazy story, because you can quite literally make a story that does not make sense. But when you strip this narrative down to its key components, basically you have a series, the chain of cause and effect, and basically one person's actions leading to an event, and then another person's actions, and so on. It's basically a chain of of incompetency in response to a crisis and the stages to that crisis. And when you have people at the top who are in control of this situation and have access to potential measures that could make the entire situation a whole lot better, they decide not to use those measures because it would affect their image overall to the public, because they are scared about preserving their own personal identity, when in reality, and arguably at the very end of it, their identity is going to be pretty tarnished anyway, because they can only really see in the here and now. So from the very spaceship crashing at the very beginning, that is the only, hopefully, implausible element of this story. Everything that happens after in response to that crisis is very much realistic to what a government could do and probably would do, as opposed to what are the reasonable actions at that current time, because we have the initial event happening, the response to that after, and they're trying to save as many lives as possible, however using actions which in fact creates more casualties, then a response to that crisis through the release of an app that doesn't actually work, that they just so happen to have spent a lot of money on, the people who are responsible for putting up the likes of cordons in order to contain the disaster, or to contain once again the ripple effect of even more casualties, are not qualified in that job, and they do not have the skills to in fact put in that cordon in place in order to protect people. And as you get to this point, then you have cancel culture coming in, then you have the people claiming it's all a hoax, and the people who believe that they can go and do what they want and their actions will not affect everybody else. Everything about this story is commentating on different levels of people in society, but more importantly, those people in power and the people who equally sit back and do nothing at the same time. Arguably they are just as bad as the people who are committing the actions, because without them actually standing up for what they believe in, they are just letting these people get away with what they do every single day, ultimately leading to even more death. There is only one Torchwood character that can be responsible for creating a story the likes of this and actually following those people throughout that process, and that is Yvonne Hartman. I honestly think that this story is really tailor-written to the character, and you can tell it. It's a bleak episode, it's dramatic, but also at the same time very, very important. It commentates on key matters, and I'd just like to end off by saying, Yvonne Hartman, you do have the authority. So there we have it, that is the 5 people you kill in Middlesbrough. I normally finish off my review with kind of stating, if you are a fan of this character or this type of plot, then this is an episode for you. But the thing with this release is that I can't really recommend it to a particular type of Torchwood or Doctor Who fan. It is a very bold story that delves into lots of different matters. If you are a fan of Yvonne Hartman, then yes, by all means, buy this story. I think in the way, if you've listened to previous Yvonne releases, you kind of know ever so slightly what to expect from this release when it comes to Yvonne's character and response to situations. However, it is undeniably a very, very bold release. I think that if you are a fan of Torchwood, even then, it is a different story. It feels different in style, so I think it's not an episode that you would expect. If anything, the one recommendation that I can give is listen to the trailer for this story, because that gives a small splice into what this episode is like as a whole, an overall package. And if you like what you hear within the trailer, then yes, listen to this story, because it is bold, it is quite shocking in parts, but it's an episode all about incompetence. This is the best incompetent Big Finish story I have ever listened to, and that's probably the weirdest compliment I've ever give in a Big Finish audio drama review, but I think it probably sums up this story in a rather accurate manner. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content, from toy reviews, merchandise reviews, audio drama reviews, and of course much, much more. So thanks for watching, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.